Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this Monday morning. I am Susan Demas, the executive editor of Lincoln Square, and I'm really happy that our founding editor, Lisa Senecal, is here this morning. I'm sure everyone has missed her. So thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
back.
Oh, thank you. I'm always very happy to be here, and good morning, everybody.
So as usual, it was a busy news weekend, and there is no shortage of things to talk about, but I did happen to see that Trump's national security advisor, Tulsi Gabbard, has a new way of trying to get him interested in his daily news intelligence briefings because he just doesn't like to read. I mean, let's be honest, and we've known this. So her idea is to do some sort of a Fox News style video so that maybe he'll get more interested in what's going on in the world. And I thought that was just the perfect Trump story.
It is. I mean, to continue to call these intelligence briefings, it's uh, such a misnomer when it comes to Trump. It was bad in his first term. No, I think by this point in his first term, he'd had like 50 or so intelligence briefings. Obama had like 63 in his first term, and Joe Biden had over 100 um, because he was a massive consumer of information. This time it's even worse with Trump. He's had like 15 intelligence briefings so far, and apparently those are a complete waste of time anyway because as you said, the man doesn't read. So handing him an intelligence briefing to read is a total waste of time. And so they don't just want to get like a Fox News host and production crew to be creating these briefings for him as a video presentation because apparently all he does is watch television all day. They even want to add animations to it. So I guess our president is going to be like watching cartoons in order to find out the absolutely essential information about what is happening nationally and internationally that the rest of us will never know about it unless you are apparently a Fox News host or a member of a production team that's going to do these and get special clearance to have like code level clearance to be able to participate in these briefings.
Right. It's astounding that the person who has the nuclear codes needs things dumbed down to the level of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's been very honest that he trusts the information that he gets from Putin more than, his
Right.
own national security advisors. And so, he seems to think that, a few calls a month with his buddy Putin and maybe Z in China and he'll be all up to speed. And I'm sure that our geopolitical adversaries would like that very much. But, as for the rest of us who are, depending on our government to keep us safe and secure, that's a really frightening notion.
Yeah, it really is. And I thought he might get more interested in the intelligence briefings because they were coming from Tulsi Gabbard and he could just assume that whatever intelligence briefing he was going to be getting from Putin was the same one he'll be getting from Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
But apparently that was not even enough
No.
to pique his interest, at
Yeah,
least to the point that
she
you
was
have
only
to.
a guest on Fox News, not a host. So apparently
Yes.
she just doesn't quite have the panache that he needs to stay interested.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Fox crew can do these from Moscow and he can get a twofer and, we can find a way to work maybe an avatar of Putin as the cartoon who is giving the briefing, and that might really get Trump interested. I don't know.
Yeah, like a hologram of him riding on a horse shirtless or something. Yeah, that would be great.
With Trump on the back and his arms around him.
And so what really struck me last week, actually before the weekend, we haven't seen a lot of Republicans doing town halls, and we got some sense of why that is with a hall that Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa held, where she was very touchy with her constituents who were asking her about these gigantic healthcare cuts, especially Medicaid cuts that are coming through in the, MAGA murder budget, which apparently everyone has decided to call a big, beautiful bill, which just does Trump's work for him. Um, and, after she was confronted by some of her constituents, many of whom probably voted for her. I mean, Iowa is a safe red state at this point. She just kind of, gave a very blasé attitude of, look, we're all going to die. So, no biggie that, 15 million people are about to lose healthcare and the rest of us will see our rates shoot up, and that will also contribute to declining health and death rates. And then, of course, she decided that that wasn't good enough, and she even did an Instagram live video from a cemetery where she made fun of everyone for being offended by her and said, look, I didn't think that I needed to tell you that the tooth fairy wasn't real either. So that's what passes for constituent service, I guess, nowadays. But what were your thoughts on this? And I know everyone's probably forgotten about it, but it kind of encapsulates this attitude that so many Republicans seem to have towards their constituents, this contempt.
Yeah, there is such a lack of empathy in the Republican Party now, and it's not just the lack of empathy, but it's the ability to show that you have none that seems to hold real cachet in the MAGA movement. But they're making death great again, I guess. It's it's confusing because they want to increase birth rates, right? There aren't enough, especially white babies being born in the United States, but they have no qualms at all about killing off white people, apparently, because the majority of people on Medicaid, we have to remember, are white Americans. And, they like us to think that, these are always people of color. And that has gone back decades. And the truth is, it has always been white Americans who consume more social services per capita, not just because there are more white people in the United States, but so for Ernst to be so blasé about the fact that people literally are going to die because they're not going to be able to get the health care that they need. And it is not only Medicaid recipients. And this is something that everyone really needs to grasp, and we need to make sure that we are getting this out constantly, because Medicaid props up a lot of our rural hospitals and clinics. And without the Medicaid funding coming in any longer, we don't have Medicaid hospitals. We have hospitals. So when the Medicaid funding doesn't come in, it's the hospitals that collapse. And those are the same ones that people on Medicare use, and all of us with private insurance or through the Affordable Care Act. So this is going to have a tremendous impact on all of us, and that Republicans have now decided that it is not a big deal if basically people who cannot afford to travel for health care or have some type of private health care will die off in greater rates. I mean, if there could be any greater example of their lack of caring about income inequality, I can't think of one, because now they don't care if we die.
Right. And, when Joni Ernst was first elected in 2014 during, a Republican wave, she had promised that she was going to repeal Obamacare. And there was so much talk about Obamacare equals death panels. And now we're seeing that, within this gigantic bill that's a huge giveaway to billionaires like Elon Musk, they're trying to, claw back some of that money with these gigantic healthcare cuts, which, basically do function as death panels. And, suddenly that's something they're okay with. I mean, it was a very effective technique that Republicans ran against Obamacare and said, well, look, they cut Medicare for Obamacare because there were cost savings involved in trying to expand healthcare access so that you didn't need to spend as much on Medicare. But it sounded big and scary that, look, they're trying to take away your healthcare to give it to people who don't deserve it. Now we're seeing huge Medicare cuts, and, people like Joni Ernst are just saying, hey, suck it up. It's not a big deal. Meanwhile, she has the best gold-plated, health insurance of anyone. And nobody's talking about them giving up their health care. Nobody is saying that, hey, Elon doesn't need another spacecraft that's probably going to explode or crash anyway. Maybe we can afford to keep our hospitals open and for people to get treatment, for cancer, instead of tax cuts that these people won't even notice.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this is just about this awful GOP MAGA rhetoric at this point, and it's not. I don't believe it's truly what they want to happen, other than it scores political points. But it is in keeping with, you score political points now if you say you're withdrawing funding from Harvard University and other universities who won't bend the knee to Trump. And, they act as though this funding for the universities is somehow just going to ultra liberal students, as though it's like their financial aid package or something, and it's not critical research being done into advances against cancer and, all of the absolutely essential research that is done in our institutions. So this increasing longevity just does not seem to be a priority across the board. And as long as they can show that they are uh, tough by being cruel, apparently that's going to sell with the base. And
Yeah.
I don't think it sells with independent voters. I don't think it's going to sell well in 26. And I think we need to be hammering on this constantly, because these are the kind of things, and there are a lot of various things in the big ugly bill that are going to have real world impacts on citizens, and it's not going to take a long time to get there.
Right. The ethos for Trump and Republicans seems to be, well, as long as something, evokes liberal tears, then it's got to be good. And, I think there are real limits to that because, we're noticing that things are getting worse. We're waiting in line a lot longer to get into national parks. Things are not working. Seniors are having a lot of trouble getting a hold of somebody at Social Security. And so, yes, there are a lot of liberals who are not very happy about this, but it's not just liberals. It's a lot of their voters too. It's making things worse for everyone. And so, if all you want to do is own the libs and not make anything better for anyone, I hope there is a limit to that. And, it's up to us to make sure that there are costs exacted for this, like we did for Elon with the Tesla takedown protests, because, there is a reason why he decided to take his ball and go home, maybe with Stephen Miller's wife, we don't know. Because he can't stand the hate. He can't stand that he's not beloved by people, as he wants to rule over them. And so, and that is Trump's weakness as well. That's why he keeps backing off of tariffs, because people are upset about it and he wants people to love him. So, these are things for us to keep in mind as we try and effectively push back. And one area that, we definitely need to be pushing back on are these increasingly violent ICE raids. I mean, we saw that it looked like it was something, out of a military raid with grenades, when ICE went into an Italian restaurant in San Diego to do mass arrests. And, there was an aide to Representative Jerry Nadler who was arrested right in his office. They're being very brazen. It's clear that they want this kind of media attention. They want to evoke this kind of fear and for no one to feel safe. But that's just really unacceptable, because, you're seeing a rise of these stories of people who are like, well, yeah, I wanted him to, deport the gang members and the criminals, but, not people that I've known in my town for 40 years, not moms. Nobody voted to deport moms was, a recent headline last week.
But actually, they did. That's exactly what they
Yeah.
voted for. Like, you don't. This was one of the great frustrations that I know we were all feeling before November of last year. That the understanding among um, the Latino community, primarily, but all communities where there's a large immigrant population. The idea that this was only going to be violent criminals, that's not even something that Trump's campaign was saying. They
Right.
were just saying criminals.
Hmm.
And the fine print there was that anybody who was in the United States without legal documentation is a criminal.
Hmm.
And that does include moms. That does
Hmm.
include grandmothers. We have people who have been in this country who do not have proper documentation for more than a generation. So, yes, these are brothers and sisters and friends and coworkers. They are the lifeblood of a lot of communities and certainly of industries in the United States. So, the idea that somehow Trump was going to be very surgical about the people who he was going to be deporting, when at the same time he was putting out huge numbers of people who were going to be deported, those two things never added up. You
Right.
couldn't come up with that many violent criminals in the United States because they don't exist. So, this was always the plan. And it's not going quite according to plan
Hmm.
because they're not removing people as quickly as they would like to be able to, and the courts are throwing up some roadblocks. But as we keep seeing, those roadblocks, sometimes the administration is just going to go around or through them and not worry about the rule of law when it comes to court orders that are being put in place to at least try to slow down the illegality of what the Trump administration's doing.
Right. And we also saw, with his tariffs plan, he was very upfront with what he wanted to do. This was not anything that was terribly scientific. And yet, it seems like the majority of Wall Street investors who are supposed to be the savviest, fiscal minds in the country, they didn't believe his rhetoric either. And so, I think there was a pattern of people hearing what they wanted to hear from Trump, and just there were a lot of people who were not really happy with the direction of the country, and they thought some sort of alternative would be better. Um, it's my hope that there are some openings now as we're seeing what Trump is really doing with these violent raids, with these tariffs that are making prices so much worse when that was the primary thing he was supposed to make better. And he said he would do it on day one. So, those are openings for us to have conversations with people. It may not be the diehard MAGA people who are never going to walk away from him, but he did win, a number of independents, a number of people who don't pay very close attention to what's going on because they're just trying to get by. But, we need to be able to have those conversations with them so that we can, use their discomfort and their dismay with what Trump is really doing and turn that into action where we can fight for something better. And so, I thought it would be a good time for us to just talk a little bit about what we'll be talking about in the week ahead on Lincoln Square. Some of the issues that we'll be talking about, some of our upcoming shows. We've now had Anchor Watch on. Yes.
So sorry about that. Fezzik here, everybody. Fezzik lives. How nice. I'm going to be myself for a minute.
Tomorrow we have Anchor Watch with Bobby Jones, and you're not going to want to miss that. His show right after Memorial Day was so important. And of course, with Trump's upcoming parade, I know that Bobby is going to have a lot to say about that. So that's at noon every week, right here in Lincoln Square on Tuesdays. And so please tune in for that. And then, of course,
I'll just give a quick plug on that show. If people have not watched Bobby Jones's show yet, Anchor Watch is amazing because Bobby Jones is amazing. He is a really unique voice. There just aren't a lot of people with his background in the military who can speak so eloquently and with such depth and experience and charisma. It's a great, great show. So I hope people are tuning into it.
Absolutely. Also on Tuesday night, we always have our strategy session with Rick Wilson, Stuart Stevens, and Joe Trippi, so that you get the inside skinny into how they are those calls that they have, strategizing on the right message to reach people. We have opened up a couple of those shows for everyone, but usually it's just for our paid subscribers. And really, it's a fascinating look at how just the smartest people in politics approach things. And you come out of there thinking, well, if we just put them in charge, probably things would be a lot easier and we get to the heart of things instead of, watching people feel around at press conferences and Chuck Schumer issue a strongly worded letters, just a call, I would say, with Rick, Joe, and Stuart, and we'd have a bit of a different direction.
Yeah, and it's nice that, there is some policy that gets discussed, but they're so good at keeping the focus on the fact that this is not about just policy differences with the right. This is about an authoritarian takeover of the United States by Donald Trump and his team of monsters. So the conversation gets much deeper and more strategic than these are the policy initiatives that we should be putting forward instead into this is how we fight back against an authoritarian regime based on what we've learned historically and what we see happening in other countries right now.
Right. Absolutely. So don't miss that one. I'm very excited. Later on today, I'll be talking with Leah Littman, who is a law professor at the University of Michigan, and she has just written a book called Lawless on our very conservative Supreme Court. And not only is she very funny and has just incisive takes, but she really brings all the facts to the table and the history of these issues. And so I think that'll be a really fascinating conversation later on at 2 today.
Yep. And then later on this week, I see that you have one of our fan favorites and our favorites, David Pepper, coming in for a conversation on Thursday. And Joe and Alex are going to be having their regular conversation on Friday at noon. And earlier on Friday at 10 a.m. is the Wilsons with Rick Wilson and his son, who they have brilliant, very entertaining conversations. And they sound like a band. So
They do.
maybe we can get the Wilsons to do a duet while they're on. And then Susan, you have another show on Friday afternoon coming up.
Yeah, every week, I've been talking with people in the media, since I've spent, many, many years in journalism. And last week, I talked with Holly McCall, who is an editor down in Tennessee. And it was great to get her perspective on what's going on in a red state that's been the model for so much of the MAGA agenda. And they've actually been able to get things through that we haven't seen in Washington. And so I think that's really helpful for us to talk with people who are reporting on things on the ground in states, both, swing states and non, because, we don't know what the election is going to look like in 2026. Nobody thought that Doug Jones was going to win an Alabama Senate seat in his special election in 2017. So, you know, getting a sense of what's going on in the ground is so important. Plus, who better to talk to than people who are watching the media and part of the media about how things are being covered? Because if there's one thing that we hear from all of you all the time is your frustration with mainstream media coverage. And we're so happy to have you as part of our Lincoln Square community. And we're glad that you want to show up to all of these lives with your great comments. But we also know that you are the people who subscribe to newspapers and you watch your daily news broadcasts and you want to see them covering Trump well. And so, that's another part of what we can do. We've seen that the right wing has been so effective at working the refs and getting the kind of coverage that they want. That's why we keep hearing about Trump's big, beautiful bill, because he keeps pushing it. And they're like, oh, well, if we call it that, then, maybe he'll return our calls and call on us at the next press conference. And, we won't be singled out for our reporters to be assaulted at his next rally. But we all know that that is not the way you deal with bullies. You have to call out behavior. It's our job to report the facts. That's what you count on us for. And so, with those of us who are willing to tell the truth in independent media about how mainstream outlets, corporate outlets are falling short, that's another way that we can try and save one of our great institutions in this country that's supposed to be part of the pillars of democracy. And so I think that's really important for us to do too.
And I want to applaud the work that you are doing, Susan, as now the head of Lincoln Square Media, and the work that is being published on this platform is absolutely outstanding. A lot of it is free, some of it is paywalled. I strongly encourage anyone who is able to take out a paid subscription, support independent media, support this work that is being done, and make sure that it exists for everyone to be able to consume, whether or not they are able to have a paid subscription. It keeps it available
Yes.
by funding the work that gets done. So encourage everybody to subscribe who can, share the work that this amazing organization is doing. And thank you, Susan, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me back. I'm going to bop in and out of here from time to time as I'm invited, and I'm always so excited to talk with you, and obviously to have a chance to speak with the incredible Lincoln Square community. It's really it's such an engaged, bright, important group that is formed around Lincoln Square. So thank you, everybody, for always engaging, both here and in your communities.
Thank you for being here. And Lisa, please do not be a stranger.
I will not. Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.